Hey guys, assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to my channel. Is Goa വന്നിട്ട് full beach destination ഒക്കെ മാറ്റിട്ട് ഇന്ന് മ്യൂസിയം ഓഫ് ഗോവയിലോട്ടാണ് ഇന്ന് വന്നത്. So let's see. ഉള്ളിൽ പോയിട്ട് നോക്കാം എന്തൊക്കെയുണ്ടെന്ന്. ഓക്കെ ഗൈസ്, മാക്സിമം ഗോവ മ്യൂസിയമിൻ്റെ എല്ലാ ആർട്ട് ഡീറ്റെയിൽസ് ഞാൻ കവർ ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. പക്ഷേ വീഡിയോയിലൊന്നല്ല നിങ്ങൾക്ക് കാണണ്ടേ, നേരിട്ട് വന്ന് കണ്ടാലേ അത് നിങ്ങൾക്ക്
ശരിയാണ്. നിങ്ങൾ നേരിട്ട് വന്ന് ഇത് കണ്ടാലുള്ള ഇതിന്റെ ആർട്ട് വർക്കെല്ലാം എന്താ പറയുക ആസ്വദിക്കാൻ പറ്റുള്ളൂ. ശരിക്കും അത് ഡയറക്ടറിനെ വന്ന് കാണണം. പിന്നെ ഇവിടെ വന്ന സ്ഥിതിക്ക് നിങ്ങളും കൂടെ ഇവിടെ എന്തൊക്കെ ഉണ്ടെന്ന് കാണിച്ചു തന്നുള്ളൂ. പക്ഷേ എന്തായാലും മസ്റ്റായിട്ട് നിങ്ങൾ ഗോവയാണെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഡയറക്റ്റ് ഇവിടെ ഒന്ന് വിസിറ്റ് ചെയ്യുക. അതിൻ്റെ ആർട്ട് വർക്കുകൾ ഇഷ്ടമുള്ളവർ ഇത് ഭയങ്കരമായിട്ട് ആസ്വദിക്കാൻ പറ്റിയ അതെ ഒരു സ്ഥലമാണ്. ക്രിയേറ്റിവിറ്റി ഭയങ്കര ക്രിയേറ്റിവിറ്റിയാണ്. ഓക്കെ
ഇത്രേ ഉള്ളൂ അപ്പോൾ ഇന്നത്തെ വീഡിയോ. ഞാൻ ഡോക്യുമെന്ററി ഇടും ഇത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട്, വേണ്ടവർ ഡീറ്റെയിൽ ആയിട്ട് ഒന്ന് അതിനെ പറ്റി അറിയാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാണ്. സോ നമുക്ക് അടുത്ത വീഡിയോയിൽ കാണാം. Until then, stay tuned to our channel. Bye-bye.
Always been considered strange because I was a doctor and then I stopped my medicine, started doing watercolors, sitting on the roadside, and I was doing very well as a doctor. I did not give it up because I was not doing well. I was extremely successful. So first thought a doctor has gone crazy. I mean, this is such a good practice, and now he sits on the roadside and does some painting. And one old man asked me, normally people like to climb up the ladder of success. Why do you come down? It was all right until they did my watercolors. Then I started planting shells. So for most people, the idea of planting shells as a profession was the most weird thing to do for an adult. I learned my basic painting skills from my father. Initially, I did rather traditional watercolors. And for the last 20 years, I've been experimenting with different mediums, different kinds of work. And then I traveled around the world. And I would say that I learned my work from museums of modern art. Initially, when I went to Tate Modern, for example, I did not understand most of the works because I was not trained to understand them. And then I thought either I'm a fool or they're taking me for a ride. I decided maybe I'm a fool, let me learn. And that started the process. And after some time, I mean, it was wonderful. A kind of Pandora's box was opened to me by the museums, by the art fairs, by the biennales. And here am I, basically doing a lot of conceptual work now. Turning a walk into a sculpture, which Richard Long floated. I was really fascinated by that idea, the concept of making a walk into a sculpture. And I had done some lamps. So I took one of my lamps, a copper lamp, went to the beach, dug a crater, placed my disc on the top of the crater with the electrical bulb underneath it and electrical wire running under the sand, took the electrical connection from a beach shack. And when I put the light on, I was stunned. It was not intentional what I did. It was almost accidental. And my first piece of land art is called a 10th planet because I felt like God. I felt I have created a planet. Most of my work, which I do on the beach, is very temporary, which is ephemeral. It reminds me of a lovely poem by Tagore, who is my favorite poet. It says, the waves write their poetry on the sand and not satisfied, wipe them off over and over again. So my works are kind of my poetry on the sand, and the waves wipe them off too. There will be some works which I do with shells, which will just last until the high tide comes. That's again a few hours. Well, I consider myself an ocean artist, a sea artist, because as a child, I used to go for a walk from the age of 6 to 16 with my father every day for 2 hours. We have hardly missed a day. And those walks were actually very important to me. That not only sort of created a great relationship between me and my father, but also my father instilled a lot of dreams into me. We would sit down and watch the waves break, the surf run onto the sand, and wet sand. But most of the waves broke and wet the same sand which was wet before. And then a bigger wave would come, hurry ahead, and wet new sand. And my father told me, son, anything what you do, it is most important to wet new sand. I do not know whether in my artistic endeavors I have wet new sand, but if I am not, I will try my best to. And This kind of walks sort of created a great relationship between me and the sea. The sea became a friend, a master, a muse, and an inspiration. And so a lot of my work is now connected with the ocean. When I plant shells, it is not just because they're beautiful, it looks interesting. When I do that, there's a wonderful kind of a symbiotic relationship. Inspiration, medium, and the canvas. The sea is my canvas, the shells are given to me by the sea, the sea is the inspiration, and sea is also the theme. I have worked with sand and light. Every child, when a child is asked to do a sunset picture, they just a sun and a triangle of lines. So I decided to create my triangle of lines with just some kind of burrows and light behind. See, I'm always open to all kind of materials. And with this new material, that old truck tires, which I very often use now, which I got acquainted with in Jaipur. In Jaipur, I saw a shop selling products made out of old truck tires. When I bought this material, I didn't know what I would do with it. And I thought that on the roads of Rajasthan, the soles of the camel fit get worn out, and so do the tires of the trucks. So I decided to make a camel foot with old truck tires. The ideas are important to me, and then new materials fascinate me. So one day I was doing an interview with a cane maker, and I found this story very interesting and the way he was working. So I decided, okay, I made a drawing and said, can you do that? And he did it for me. And then we just used them as lamps in a festival. So I've always been fascinated with boats, the wooden boats, especially the way the two pieces of wood are joined to create the boats. For me, that's wonderful. And I have been, as a child, clicking pictures of the surfaces of boats because the surfaces are so rich. Because for 50, 60 years, the waves have played upon this body of the boat, creating all these surfaces. And I loved them. And then, slowly, the fishermen are now using fiberglass boats because they're cheaper, they're lighter, they consume less petrol, and so they sell the old boats. They don't know what to do with them. So one day I bought an old boat, and I started working with this, and it was a wonderful experience because here I was working with a boat which was already in use for 60, 70 years. So the whole story of the boat is incorporated in my sculpture, which I make out of this boat. So it's like using history as a medium for sculpture itself. The songs of the fishermen, the lines, the grooves made by the rope, which pull the nets into the boat, the waves playing and making those textures, all that becomes part of my sculpture. When I was asked to do this installation, one of the biggest problems was this big hotel, Burj Arab. Now, Burj Arab was so dominating, to do something next to it, which will stand, was a big challenge. But interestingly, what happened was because of the shape of the boats and I put them vertical, it just goes very well. I realized that the oceans, which separate the continents, were also responsible for uniting the continents. I was a doctor practicing on the seaside. I had a hospital where I said babies were born to the music of the waves because it was that near. All the fishermen were my patients. And I realized that their life is so much intimate with the ocean. It's almost inseparable. And that idea of inseparability fascinated me. Because if you have studied the life of the fishermen, they don't sleep at home. They sleep on the beach under the open sky. They get up in the middle of the night, push the boat, go into the ocean, come back early morning, the wives are waiting with their breakfast, and they carry the fish they have brought to the markets. And then the whole life is totally connected. And what I realized is, in spite of the tourism, the life of a lot of fishermen remains unaffected. So I decided that I will do something expressing this idea of inseparability. So the fishermen become the boat, the fishermen become the fish. The whole history of human civilization is dissolved in the ocean. And through my work, I try to precipitate that history. Indigo is another very important commodity in the ships which sail from India. Indigo is a color which is supposed to have seduced the world. It has been used for times immemorial. And initially, indigo came from a plant. When Gandhi arrived in India, he had come with his paraphernalia of new experiments with his satyagraha. And the first satyagraha in India was actually to help the indigo workers. There were some very interesting dramas written in Bengal One is called Neelatarapan, which is about the indigo. And so indigo really fascinated me, and I loved the color. And then I found this very wonderful way of doing it, that I started covering rocks with indigo. Initially, when I started covering the rocks, I didn't know how to do it, because first I went with 100 toilet papers and some glue, thinking that I will cover the rock with toilet paper and then apply indigo to it. And then I also carried a sieve, and it was very windy. And I just put a little bit indigo in the sieve and just tapped it, and the wind did the job. What I had thought would take 10 hours was done within 10 minutes by the wind. And just within half a kilo of indigo, I could cover a huge rock. And that's how this series started. The ocean was a vehicle, as an enzyme, a medium for intercontinental cultural diffusions. Chilies, for example, we never had in India. Chilies were there only in South America, and chilies were brought by the Portuguese in 1500, and within 50 years they spread all over India, Southeast Asia, and China, and Japan, and we cannot think of Indian food without chilies now, and very few Indians will be aware that chilies are not from India. I made some chilies which are covered with Rajasthani cloth, kind of an Indianization of chilies. So basically all this history I try to stir with my work. It was not just chilies, even the religions got Indianized. If you go to Kerala, Christianity arrived in India much before it went to Europe. In 52 AD, Thomas, the apostle, came to Kerala, and the first church was built in Kerala. And slowly, there were transformations happening even in the way the cross was depicted. So I made one of the works where actually I have clad the cross with Krishna as a dress. I was invited to do a work in a garden in Lisbon, and this garden has been existing ever since the days of Vasco da Gama. There was a chapel in the garden, and even Vasco da Gama has prayed in that chapel before setting sails for India. So since the Portuguese managed to change the whole food history of India, I decided I would take a kind of a poetic revenge. So I carried rice from Goa and planted it in that garden, tracing the route of Vasco da Gama. So when the rice grew there, it just did not grow rice, but it sprouted history. And I started reading more, and I realized that a pepper was so very important. A pepper actually determined the history of India. If we did not have pepper, perhaps the colonial powers would not come here. They came to control the pepper trade, which was earlier held by the Arabs, and they wanted an alternate route. That's how Vasco da Gama found an alternate route, because through Arabia it was impossible for them to defeat all the Arabs and come through Arabia. And many countries in Europe use pepper as a currency. Pepper has played such a very important role. So then slowly I started exploring pepper. The pepper cross, actually, I wanted to create a form of cross. And initially the idea was to put real peppercorns on the whole surface. But how to put the peppercorns? So I decided to make a little bit of a hole. And then I realized that I don't need to put any peppercorns there, because that itself was wonderful. Cotton, incidentally, grew only in India, not in Europe. And they had such myths and such misinformation about cotton, even in the 13th century. An Englishman writes about cotton. He says, there in India exists a tree called cotton. It grows lambs at the tip of the branches, and the lambs can feed on grass because the branches are very pliable, and the lambs produce wool, which is called cotton. And so I decided to make my cotton pots and have a head of lamb, and then the whole area of the cotton I covered with crochet designs, because crochet was brought from by Portuguese. It is Portuguese technique of knitting. And it came from Portugal, and the cotton went from here. So I'm there are many layers in my work. There are historical layers, social layers, aesthetic layers,